You've worked hard on your characters, their backstory, their personality, and you've done everything that you can to make them shine. But as soon as they start talking, it all just sounds so fake that everything falls apart. In this video, I'll cover everything you need to know to make your dialogue feel real and keep people wanting to know what happens next. Now, the number one thing is that each and every character is their own individual person, at least in their mind, as far as they're concerned, they are. They have their own wants and needs, and they should be acting in a way that furthers those wants and needs. For example, in a conversation or an interrogation, does one want info and another is not giving it for some reason? Maybe the second character wants something in return for this information, or maybe they're just flat out not willing to give it because they just don't even like the person asking at a basic level. They're both the main character from their perspective. So what you need to do is make sure they actually act like it so that your character doesn't seem like they're talking to a cardboard cutout. Show who your characters are through their mannerisms and their word choice. Do they stutter and fidget? Do they yell? Do they stay calm? Each and every one of these things gives us at least a little bit of insight as to who they are. Does the character use fancier words or simpler words? Do they understand and potentially use niche terms that stem from their life experience? And as they talk, you want to mix in actions and movements and other physical stuff that they do. Whether or not you're writing a manuscript for a novel or a screenplay where there's going to be actors making their own sort of decisions, if you don't give people something that helps them get a visual in their mind, they're just going to imagine people standing around doing nothing, probably not moving. They're going to miss different cues as to your character's mood and disposition, and your character is just going to sort of feel like a fake prop as opposed to a real person. A lot of people, when it comes to dialogue, it's very curated and everything is perfect, kind of like a play. And that is another way where there's room for improvement. You want to have your characters lie. You want to have them misremember things. And you also want them to say things that are just flat out wrong or incorrect if the situation permits it. Nobody's perfect, and by encapsulating that, you are giving your story a layer of authenticity. If you have two characters that are arguing about the past, you could have them both be right, but still have conflicting views on what happened. A good example of this would be Johnny Lawrence in Cobra Kai. So you watch The Karate Kid 1 from the perspective of Daniel LaRusso, and it seems like Johnny Lawrence is just this bully and just this guy actively antagonizing him and being a bad person. But when you watch Cobra Kai, which takes place a good 35 years later or something, Johnny Lawrence is more of a main character at that point. And then when it comes to him and he tells the story of what happened to another character, you see how maybe things weren't necessarily as simple as it seemed in the movie, and how from Johnny's point of view, he's actually not even the bad guy. A big thing when it comes to dialogue is subtext. Most people don't directly say what they mean when they mean it. They either hide their true feelings or they try to say what they mean in a roundabout way to sort of try to get the same result they're looking for. Whether they intend to do that or not, it can be potentially them trying to be polite, or that they're not comfortable with actually being direct in that scenario. Or it could be that if they say things the wrong way, there is an almost zero chance that things are going to go the way they want them to. Now, this can be subtle, it can be overt, it can be pretty clear in the heat of the moment, or it could be a thing where it's not until significantly later something else happens and it gives context to an earlier passage, right? An example of an overt type of subtext is if a character yells, "I'm fine," and they're clearly very angry, they're not fine, and everybody knows it. The subtext is that they don't want to talk about it. Another example is if a character says, in a sort of disappointed or condescending or sarcastic way, "Do you really think that's such a good idea?" The subtext is, "I don't think that's a good idea. Potentially, I think it's straight up dumb, but I'm not going to flat out say, hey, that's dumb." Another thing that's good for dialogue is allowing your characters to have mundane conversations and downtime, stuff that shows who they are and what they do and what they're like and demonstrates their personality, and does it in a low stakes way. Now, this can also help to manage your tension in a book or a script. You don't want your tension to constantly be at a 10 out of 10 because your viewer or your audience adjusts to that, and the 10 out of 10 all of a sudden becomes, a 3 out of 10, and now all of a sudden you got to somehow spike back up to a 10 out of 10 and severely outdo what you're already doing. Allowing the tension to go down gives them a bit of a calm down time, a bit of a release from that tension, and it grounds your characters and makes them feel more real. Not everybody is absolutely at the pinnacle of doing something exhausting for an extended period of time, like days and weeks straight. There's going to be time where they have just a normal day or a normal scene or whatnot, and there's a bit of time to reset. Now, the thing is, you got to be very careful not to overuse that technique. If all of your conversations are mundane, then your story is mundane, and there's no point in interacting with it or being a part of it. You want interesting stuff to happen, you want tension all the way through, but you want varying levels of it. So do have the mundane conversations in it, just don't go too hard with those. Another piece of advice is to avoid exposition, like sentences that start with "as you know," or a character talking to their cousin and they start the sentence with "hey cousin" or something like that. Maybe it's situationally okay, but if you're relying on things like that, you are leaving more to be desired in your art craft. The thing about "as you know" is if somebody knows it, it doesn't need to be resaid, right? So, "as you know" dialogue is the type of thing where it's very clearly for the audience and it brings the audience out of it, makes them hyper aware of the fact that they're not actually experiencing this world or this story. It is just something fake that's been done for their amusement. The only time you should probably start with "as you know" in a piece of dialogue or something is if there's a reason to do it. Like, for example, a character makes a very obvious mistake and a very preventable mistake, for example, and somebody else says "as you know," and they say it in like a frustrated tone, for example, and then explain why that mistake was dumb and why the character should have known ahead of time. That circles around to not being bad writing because it's less about exposition and it's more about demonstrating the relationship and the interaction while also giving a little bit of info that maybe you couldn't have otherwise. As always, make sure to leave a comment down below. Give me any questions you have. If I can answer it with a quick message, I'll do that. If not, maybe I'll make a full video about it.